Welcome to episode 24 of PVTV, where we talk all things solar. On today's episode, we answer a question from John O'Keefe, who asks, what batteries do you use, and do you recommend them to be installed under cover? What sort of temperature ranges are recommended? As where I live, we quite regularly get -4 to -10 degrees Celsius, I assume, in winter. We use lithium batteries.
We do use.
We're talking about solar batteries to be specific. John's asking what batteries we use in our solar products. So yeah. Lithium, essentially.
Lithium is essentially, yeah, it is lithium. All our products use lithium batteries. We mainly use two different brands. Mm-hmm. So we'll go into it a little bit later, but the BSL battery is one we import, and Pylon-Tech, which is a pretty well-known brand in Australia already. Operating temperatures is a good one because the data sheets for a lot of batteries, especially lithium batteries, can be a little bit confusing, borderline deceptive in a way. Let's take a BYD battery, for example, which is a very popular battery. An operating range might say -20 degrees to +65 degrees. That's a pretty wide range. You think, you beauty, that should be good. But what actually happens is the charging and the discharging inside of that have two different operating ranges as well. So what we're finding with lithium, it seems to just be a characteristic of lithium that when temperatures get cold, lithium's charging ability is quite significantly reduced. So under 10 degrees, for BYD in particular, we found that under 10 degrees, they wouldn't charge as fast. Under 10 degrees, they drop to about half the charging capacity. And when you get to zero, they don't charge at all. But however, they will discharge all the way down to -20 degrees. So
at full rate?
At full rate.
Okay.
So they're technically operating, but not entirely operating between that full range.
Is the deceptive part that when you talk operating ranges for lithium batteries, there's two kinds. So there's when it's charging and when it's discharging.
Correct.
And do companies advertise both, or is the deception that often they just advertise
not generally.
both?
They'll just advertise an operating range. So I would encourage people to have a look at a data sheet for a battery they might be considering, a lithium battery in particular. You will usually only find an operating range, and it usually goes down to like -20, -15, quite low. Below.
So you'd see
0.
that, and you would think, "You beauty."
Yeah, this thing's going to work.
John would think, I can use this battery in the middle of winter where I live, but
exactly
really
right.
He can only discharge it. He can't charge it when it's cold.
And the problem with charging at not charging it at low temperature is we usually need to charge our batteries early in the morning, and that's usually when it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
Right. So it does become a problem, and what will happen is those batteries just won't charge. Now they will still discharge, so the power won't cut out. So that's a good thing. But until they heat up to over 10 degrees or maybe even over 15, they're not going to get that full capacity of charging.
What about if it's like 5 degrees? Would you be able to... and the sun comes out in the morning and it's about 5 degrees, just for reference sake, would it?
Every battery is a bit different. So I was looking through the BSL, which is our battery data sheet a little bit early on. That actually does specify the two ranges. So that says full charge from 0 degrees to 65. It'll have full charging ability, and it will have full discharging ability from -20 to 65. So under 0, it's not going to not charge. It's going to charge slower. It's going to charge, and then as you get colder and colder and colder, eventually it will not charge at all.
Yeah,
that's just how lithium works. There's probably not a lithium out there that works differently to that. Lithium batteries that's just how they operate.
It's a chemistry thing.
It's a chemistry thing.
Yeah. In a solar system, Ross, there's a battery, and that battery usually plugs into an inverter, which the solar panels plug into, and that inverter acts like the brain between the battery and the solar panels, essentially, and the house or the premises.
Yeah. How does the inverter know to stop charging or to reduce charging? Newer batteries like the BSL, BYD, Pylon-Tech, all these new batteries have a management system called a battery management system, or BMS. That is connected to your inverter, or at least your inverter control module, and the two are communicating to the second about temperature. So the battery will send data to the inverter.
Yeah.
That data will be maximum charge rate, minimum charge rate, maximum discharge rate, amp hours, temperature, volts, all that sort of stuff. When the battery starts getting colder and colder, it'll start reducing that charge rate, and the inverter knows not to put any more power into the battery. Works really well. We've seen it. It can be Annoying because your batteries aren't charging, but it is good for the battery. The battery's going to last. You know, your lithium comes with a 10-year warranty. Most lithium batteries, right? So that's how they make sure you actually get that 10-year warranty out of them, is by protecting themselves.
Yeah, it's a computer, right?
Yeah.
It's a computer that sits between the battery and the inverter, and it's like an intermediate, the thing that sits between the two.
Correct.
And it communicates the temperature of the batteries to the inverter, so the inverter knows not to charge them if it's too cold, etc. But not all batteries have that computer between the batteries and the inverter to manage that power supply.
If a battery doesn't have the management system,
Yeah.
And that's called an unmanaged battery, some people call it a self-managed battery. All in all, the inverter will not know what temperature the battery is running at. There are certain ways where you can add manual temperature sensors in that, but just battery and inverter connected straight to each other, it's going to give that battery a full charge just when it sees it go down. So it can be bad for the battery. You don't really know. There's no management system how the battery is operating. Now that method has been, it's been used for years and years. We did that with lead. We did that with all the old school batteries do that. We prefer to go the managed route because we can ensure that the batteries are actually getting the requirements that they need. Not too much, not too little.
Yeah. So the risk is that it could damage the battery or reduce the lifespan potentially.
A bit of both, yeah. I think a bit of both, yeah.
How about the charge rate? Because I know one of the things that the BMS communicates between the battery and the inverter is the level of charge in those batteries.
Yeah.
How is that level of charge controlled? So how does the inverter know whether to charge them or not if they're full, if you don't have a battery management system in your battery?
That is another excellent question.
No, thank you.
And that is what I think the battery management system is super important, because the BMS knows exactly to the percent how much charge is in one or a stack of batteries, because it's communicating. If you've got more than one module, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the BMS creates a master battery and the rest become followers. And that BMS knows the exact charge of every single cell in every single battery. So it's giving a super accurate reading to the inverter. The inverter knows how much to charge. What's the alternate to that? What if you don't have the BMS? Well, how it works is you tell the inverter, I've got a 10 kilowatt hour battery. The inverter starts doing maths. So it's going, okay, if you're consuming 1 kilowatt and you're consuming it for 3 hours, you must have used 3 kilowatt hours. So therefore the battery must be 70%. It's a guess. It's got a lot of algorithms and maths going on, and different inverters, Victron, SMA, Electronic, they do a pretty reasonable job at getting that state of charge estimate. But if you don't get to a full charge regularly, a thing happens called SOC drift. It's where those maths and those calculations start to drift so wildly apart that your state of charge reading is completely inaccurate.
Is it that, and that's because it's guessing?
Yeah.
Because there's not a computer there to measure the exact charge rates.
Correct.
Every day the inverter's guessing how much you've charged and discharged, and so approximating how much is in the battery. So over time, because they're only estimates, there's going to be a degree of inaccuracy in an unmanaged battery.
There's just power going in and out and in and out, as any power system does. And so if it never gets, its reference point is always 100. It knows when it's at 100. If it doesn't hit that regularly, and during winter time that can happen a fair bit, then the SOC can become quite inaccurate, and your generator might start when you're not expecting it to.
We've seen this happen.
Yeah.
What's the worst? What's the worst case scenario with an unmanaged battery and SOC drift that we've seen?
Worst case scenario is you've got a generator set to come on automatically at 20%.
Battery charge?
To charge your battery.
Yeah.
The SOC has drifted, and now your inverter thinks the batteries are at 40% when they're actually at 0%, and you lose power. And you've got to go out, run out in your undies, turn your system back on, turn your Jenny on, and get it going again.
Yeah.
And that happens, and we deal with issues like that all the time. And so we've seen it, and it's not just a rare occasion. SOC drift is quite a problem with unmanaged batteries. Is
this just in off-grid, or is this in all battery setups?
It matters more in off-grid because you don't have a grid. In an on-grid, grid-connected hybrid system, the grid will always make up for any issues that the inverter and battery might be experiencing. So if you do get SOC drift, it doesn't matter. The grid's connected. It just means it's just not going to discharge into your house.
Yeah.
Off grid, it's definitely more critical.
If you're buying lithium battery, you would recommend to make sure it is a managed battery, so that it can know the temperature. The inverter can know the temperature of the batteries, and so that it can manage the state of charge more accurately as well.
The thing is, probably the one downside of managed batteries is they've got to have compatibility with the inverter.
Yeah.
So if you've got to you can't just sort of buy that battery and that inverter and that charge controller. They all have to have some sort of communication. So Victron is good at that sort of stuff. And most popular, like Pylon and now BSL and BYD, those sort of brands, they're quite compatible with almost everything. So you usually don't have too much of an issue. But managed, that's probably the one drawback, is that it's got to have compatibility with the inverters.
Okay, because the software obviously needs to be compatible across that. What brand do we use finally for?
So we use a brand called BSL.
Yeah.
We've been working with BSL for 3 or 4 years now. We went through quite a testing process to see their compatibility, see the company, see a few different things about them, and they've been really good. You know, they've been a good battery. They've got the management system. It's compatible with the inverters we use. They've got quite a decent operating range in terms of charge and discharge. So to answer John's question again, under 0 degrees, it's not going to charge very well. It will still discharge, however. Probably
worth mentioning for John, having your equipment inside can make a huge difference. Especially, especially if it's in a cabinet like our Skybox, because you'll generate heat from the inverters, and that will actually be significantly warmer in a shed in our cabinet versus equipment that's outdoors exposed to the wind and the elements. So highly recommend, if you've got a spot indoors for it, if you can consider an all-in-one product like the Skybox, so that you can capture some of that heat, and that's going to move towards the battery system and keep it warm. Thanks, John. Our camera just died. See you on next episode.
Our battery just died on our camera, so Sam is now holding the camera. Any more questions or any inquiries that you think of, chuck them in the comments below, and we'll get back to it in the next episode.